Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Now I am re-recording this intro. I hope it's sharp. I'm just using manual focus now, but for the last half an hour this camera has been bouncing back and forth from the Nanoleaf to me and is the most jarring thing ever. So for this video there's going to be no face cam. But anyways, with that said, I just got back from a trip to beautiful Canmore and Banff, Alberta, took tons of photos, and I really wanted to share this awesome teal and orange preset that I thought looked really cool with these nature shots. This will also be available for you guys to download, but you're gonna have to stick around to the end of the video if you want to see how you can download the XMP file, bring it into desktop, and play around with it yourself. Before we get started though, drop a like on this video, subscribe if you want to see some more editing tutorials, free presets, and whatnot. But yeah, without further ado, let's hop into Lightroom here and start creating. So let's dive into Lightroom and get started. Now, really quickly, actually, at the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can actually download the XMP file, and you can have the exact one that I have. I know that copying a preset down, value for value can be rather difficult, especially when we're going to be manipulating the tone curve. Getting those values to be exactly the same are a little bit tricky. So let's dive right into it here. We're going to jump into Lightroom, where we've got a set of 5 images open. Now we're going to be editing this image here of Moraine Lake first, and then we're going to kind of apply it to the other images down here that we've got and kind of go from there. So first thing we're going to be doing is get that teal and orange look. So I think actually first we're going to just increase our exposure so we can actually see what's going on in our image here. And then we're going to go for that teal and orange look. Now, some people may think you get those settings within your Hue and Saturation sliders, but that's actually not true. And this is something that I found that you can only do in Lightroom Classic. If you have the other version of Lightroom, it actually doesn't have this feature. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, it might be in a newer version, but the version that I looked at did not have it. And that is right at the bottom here, our color calibration. Or sorry, I think it's our camera calibration, this guy right down here. So say you have a green here, or for example, we move the red slider here all the way to the right. You can kind of see that the blues here are becoming, the cyans are becoming a little more blue, and the greens are becoming a little more green. So we're actually telling Lightroom to look at these colors as if they are slightly different. So if we just bring the blues over to the left here, you can see we already have that teal and orange look coming in. Now the reason that you're going to want to do this before you do anything else within Lightroom is we're going to be building off of this premise. So we are telling Lightroom that we want our greens to be a little bit more orange, and we want Lightroom to see our greens as only orange. We don't even want them to see it as essentially green, which is what we're doing here with these sliders. Now, same with the blues, we're telling our Lightroom that we want these kind of blue colors to be seen more as like that cyan sort of teal color that we're going for. And of course, with just a few sliders here, this little split, you can already tell that we've got this teal and orange look coming in. And with the greens, you can kind of balance that out and find that nice happy medium. Now, when I have a subject in my scene, I tend to use the greens to kind of balance out those skin tones, because using this split can kind of make people's skin look a little bit red or a little bit orange, and that's not really what we're looking for. So we're just going to plug in some exact values here. Now, of course, I already made this preset, but I'm just going to be going through the thought process of creating it. So we're going to be taking our reds and we're going to make this plus 72, and we're going to make our greens negative 79, and we're going to make our blues negative 100. So pretty simple split. We're not going to be touching our saturation in any way, and that's going to be our starting point for our image. So if we just hit Y on our keyboard, you can see already the immediate before and after looks pretty drastic. So I really like this. This is an awesome little trick if you want that quick teal and orange look. Literally the secret is right there. There's really nothing else to it. There's no hue and saturation or color grading tricks to get this look. It's pretty much just done within the camera calibration. So next we're going to be doing our basic adjustments. So a bit of contrast, just a little bit, about 16 looks good to me. We're going to just decrease the highlights here, so you can see our highlights kind of bring back a little bit of what's going on in the mountains in the background. Now for an image like this, I don't want to just rip these out and flatten it completely. I do want some of that dynamic range to remain, so we're just going to rip out some of the shadows, but we're going to be keeping our highlights at around negative 23. Our shadows look pretty good. We do want to bring back some of the detail in here. Now, on this particular day, it was getting relatively late. As you can tell by the original, it was getting, I think this was about 8 o'clock, I want to say. So the sun had already kind of dipped behind the mountains and things were kind of looking a little bit flat. So we're going to be bringing out our shadows just so we have some of that detail here in the trees that we're kind of losing over here on the left side. So next we're going to just bring down our blacks, kind of crush those just a little bit. And we're going to do the same for our whites, just a tiny bit. I have those set to -5. And we're going to be doing the vibrant saturation split. This is something I personally do on all my photos. Very much a personal preference, but I personally like the kind of look that it gives it. So we're just going to bring up our vibrance to 26. Kind of brings in a lot of saturation here in our mountains, which I like. And we're going to be bringing up our saturation to 4. So we've got a lot of saturation, but don't worry, we're actually going to be dialing this back within our hue and saturation sliders to kind of bring back that mood, those kind of moody tones that we had in the preview image. So once we're done here with our, I think that we're just going to actually warm it, or we're going to actually cool it a little bit to 72. I'm going to type in exact values here. 7246 is what I had on the preset. And of course the tint is set to 0. We don't want any tint. So again, right now, just at the beginning, our image is looking relatively saturated, but we're going to be dialing that down in a second. So now we're going to come down to our tone curve. So this is of course going to be the hardest thing for you to copy exactly, but we're going to do our best here. I'm going to do my best to copy exactly what I had before, but like I said guys, you will be able to download this preset and just use that if you don't want to copy these down the best you can. So what we're going to be doing is add a simple S curve. So we're just going to be dragging this down like this and dragging this up. Looks like we have it about there and about here. Looks good. So a rather simple S curve, and I always like to put one point right in the middle because I do like to preserve kind of my midtones. I don't like to move them too much, but this looks pretty good to me. It was relatively subtle, the S curve here. Just checking on the other screen. Looks pretty good. Okay, so we're going to move on from that. Now we've got our red. So this is kind of interesting. With this actual preset, we go into our red, green, and blue channel, and we do a little bit of color manipulation and with the tones inside these channels. So these are extremely powerful. If you don't know what the tone curve does, I actually have a full video on the tone curve where we actually go through the entire purpose of it, how it affects your tones, and how you can get certain colors with the tone curve. So be sure to watch that video if you are totally confused as to what this tool is doing, because it is extremely powerful and extremely important to know. So what we're going to be doing here inside the red channel is we're actually going to be losing some reds inside the shadows only and adding a little bit of that cyan to our shadows. So we're going to add a point here in the middle. We're also going to add a point right here on these blocks. So I'm just using these grids here to kind of lock in my points. And of course we're going to try and keep these, oh, that's not what we're doing. We're going to try and keep these as close to the line as possible, because these are kind of just guides to lock in these positions. Because what we're now going to be doing is doing one more point in the shadows and dragging that ever so slightly down. So we've got this kind of slow curve on the bottom, and then it's going to straighten out towards the top. So we're just going to make sure this is as close there. Okay, there, that looks good to me. And about here. Now if you want to kind of see what we're doing, you can obviously toggle the tone curve on and off. Now we are adding quite a bit of contrast back into our image, but that's alright. That is kind of what we're going for. But now we're just going to be going to our greens, which we're actually be doing nothing in our greens. We're going to be going directly to our blues, where we're going to be doing the exact same thing but opposite. So we're going to be adding a point here, and we're going to be adding one more point and dragging it up this time towards the blue. Now this is a very subtle effect, so we're just going to be trying to keep it as subtle as possible. About there looks good. I'm just kind of cross-referencing it to what I have before. I want it to be as similar as possible. A very, very, very subtle curve is what we've got going on here. And even with the reds might be, nope, that looks good to me. So now we've got a rather crunchy looking image here. If we just toggle this on and off, you can see that we're adding a lot of contrast and a lot of dynamic range back into our image. And I really like the punchy kind of deep blacks that we're getting with our tone curve. So now we're going to leave that alone and move on to our hue and saturation sliders. So here is where you're going to be noticing a lot of things changing. So what we're going to do is first start with our hue sliders, where we're going to be punching in some values. Now our reds, just going to see what our reds are doing. Not too much in this one, so we're going to keep them at 0. Our oranges do control, so our oranges are what's going to be controlling the color of our trees for the most part. Now keep in mind, if you have a subject, the orange can also be controlling part of the skin, so be a little bit wary when changing that slider, as you can be making someone's skin look completely sunburnt, so keep that in mind. Now we also have the yellows, which do add sort of the same effect. I would use this more when you're trying to manipulate the colors inside the trees, where the greens would be, because it's a little bit more subtle, and this, chances are, if you have a subject in your frame, it's not going to be affecting their skin tones as much. But if you just have a scenic nature shot, then it doesn't really matter. So we're going to punch in some values here. This is what I have for the preset. We've got -12 on the red, we've got -17 on the orange, and -87 on the yellow. Now for our greens, we're going to be dragging those the opposite way. So we're going to be doing +48. We're going to be doing +100 on the aquas. So you can see a huge difference with the aquas right there as to what it's doing with our photo. Look at this. So we've got that more cyan kind of color on the left side. Bring that over and we've got that more deep blue color on the right side. And the rest we're just going to be leaving at 0. So next we have our saturation. Now the reason that I'm pretty sure with this one, so it does change the blues quite a bit, but we're going to be leaving those. I'm pretty sure the color grading is actually going to be taking care of our blues the way we want it to. So we're going to come down to our saturation, where we've got quite a few value shifts here. A lot of them to the negatives, because we really want to crush a lot of the saturation that's going on in this photo. So for our reds, we're going to do -49, -449, wow. -49 on the reds. We're going to be doing -33 on the oranges, and we're going to be doing -87 on the yellows. The greens are going to be -73. The aqua is going to be -39, -58 on the blues, and -53 on the purples, and -51 on the magentas. Now the reason that we have these numbers on the purple and the magenta is because if you know anything about chromatic aberration, that is extremely apparent when you have a very bright surface against a very dark background, or vice versa. You get that kind of magenta color kind of banding around the whites. Now you can actually fix those with, of course, your remove chromatic aberration setting here, which I always check, but you can also kind of counteract those a little bit by just moving the purple and magentas more towards like the desaturation. So if you do have any of that banding, which this image doesn't, but if you do have any of that banding, it will appear more gray as opposed to that magenta color that is a lot more standout. So that is pretty much it for these values here. So we've got quite a moody image looking right here, but just stay with me. I know it's looking a little bit different from what I showed you, but just stay with me. We're almost there. And so now we're going to come down here to our color grading. Now the new color grading feature is super awesome, but we're only going to be using the shadows and the highlights in this particular edit. So we're going to be clicking on our shadows here, and this will actually allow us to punch in values. Now I could just sit here and try and get the exact sort of value by doing this, but that's just going to take forever. So we're going to hit Control-Z, and we're just going to punch them into our hue, which is going to be 197. Oh, sorry, we're on shadows, 197 on the hue, and we're going to be 10 on our saturation. So a very, very subtle effect. Now we're going to come over to our highlights, and we're going to be punching in 215 and a saturation of 6. So again, very, very subtle, but you can, of course, toggle this on and off, and you can see that it's kind of adding in some of that blue back to our shadows. So this is looking pretty good, and I think that's pretty much it for all of our values. What we're going to do is just come up here and bring up our saturation. All right, and it looks like if we toggle back to our original teal and orange, it just looks a little bit more blue. So maybe just a little bit of a reduce in temperature. We'll fix that. About there, we can even add some contrast in. Now, when I am going over this for the second time here, that looks a little better. We do have some purples that are kind of poking through in our shadows, and I don't really want that. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what might be doing that. Now, personally, I think that this small tint change in color is actually just what's going on in our tone curve, because these values aren't exactly what they used to be. It actually looks like this red here might be like a little bit more extreme. Same with the blues. But either way, that is essentially the preset. So what I'm going to do is actually just hit this teal and orange, so we just reset it. See, as you can see, it just moved it ever so slightly, and believe it or not, that ever so slight difference can be the complete difference within your preset. So now we have our preset done. What we're going to be doing is saving this out, and we're going to be applying this to some other images and just showing you guys how you can manipulate some values to get a nice look and feel on a different set of images. So what we're going to be doing is, of course, coming up to our plus icon here. We're going to create a new preset. Now this is already saved, so I'm not actually going to save it, but you're just going to create a name and a group for your preset. Now copy down these exact adjustments here. We're actually going to uncheck lens correction because we don't need that. And we're going to make sure that exposure is unchecked as well. I explain this in all my videos, but I never save a preset with exposure data. The reason being, when you're actually previewing them on the side here, that exposure data will overwrite whatever you have, and that's not what we're looking for here. So we actually want that exposure data to be non-existent, so we can set the exposure of our image to be proper, and then preview our presets so we can actually see the previews in the proper exposure. So that is just me, but that's how I like to do things. And once you're done, just hit create. But I'm going to hit cancel because I already have it saved out. And what we're going to do is go on to some of these images and edit them up. So we've got our first image here of my friend in front of the mountains, framed between these two trees. Lots of greens in this photo. So what I'm going to do is hit this teal and orange, and you're going to see immediately that all of the greens turn this super nice orange color, and we've got those nice kind of teal colors coming in the mountains in the background. So for something like this, we have a subject in our frame. Now he is slightly out of focus. There is a way to fix this in Photoshop. I can make a video on that if you would like, but what you can do here, if we actually change the yellows, sorry, I'm not going to change the yellows, we're going to change the oranges. You can actually get multiple different colors inside your trees. So you can even have them looking like the very nice red-blue contrast, which is kind of nice. But like I said, you do have to watch out that you aren't affecting the skin tones in here. If you do see something like this happening, you can actually brush those out with the new feature inside of the new Lightroom Classic. I'm not sure what this one is. It's just the newest update. But you can actually use this Hue Adjustment slider here to kind of dial those back to what they would normally be. Something along these lines here, and then we would just manually paint out our subject. Now you can also do this with a radial filter, but I think that if you do it with the radial filter, you're might get a little bit of glowing or banding around your subject here, where it's going to be slowly kind of bleeding onto our red background here, or red background slowly bleeding onto our trees. And I'm not sure what's going on here. It looks like some interesting refraction within the lens, but I'm going to ignore that for now. So we're just going to paint out our subject rather quickly here. And as you can see, if we just hit Z on our keyboard and go back now, our subject is the proper color and the rest of our scene is changed. Now, of course, I would probably come in and maybe fix up some of these trees as well and bring those back into the more brown space. Again, you can just do this with these right here, literally something like that. And then just bring those over into the orange space. Now, of course, you would go in and do a much better job at masking this out. Don't do what I'm doing. I'm just doing it quickly for tutorial sake. But you can just use this new Hue and Saturation slider, or Hue slider, I should say, to just kind of balance those tones out and bring back those nice colors in the wood and your skin tones. Because, of course, we don't need red wood. I'm pretty sure, I know that's a type of wood, but the wood isn't actually red. Where is it? Okay, I kind of stand corrected. It's kind of red, but it's not red like what we're like in it's not like this red. So my god, look how huge these trees are. That's actually insane. Okay, anyways, what we're going to be doing now is just applying this to our other images. So we've got one here, a beautiful shot of the mountains, and in fact this one even looks better if you just do a little jiggle here and make it landscape. And then we're going to hit that teal and orange. Now for something like this, we're going to, of course, increase our temperature, warm it up a bit, and increase our dehaze. Now, it was a relatively smoky time in Alberta. There were some BC fires and the smoke was kind of drifting into that Banff Canmore area. So the dehaze is your best friend for something like that. It also does kind of bring the mountains a little bit into the foreground because they were so far away from where we actually were. Keep in mind this was shot with a 180mm lens, so it was very, very far away. But your dehaze is going to be your best friend in this situation. But with a few clicks, you've already got a nice looking shot right here. Now, we're just going to do the same thing for our next images. Apply the teal and orange look. And we're going to increase our exposure. Now for this one, we're going to be doing something a little bit different because I do want to bring back a little bit of the brightness in the sky here. Just kind of tone it down. So we're going to add a gradient filter. We're going to go like this, drag this down so it's affecting the top of our image. We're going to go to range mask luminance, show luminance mask, drag this over. So we want to clip out the blacks. About there, looks good. Uncheck that. And then we're just going to lower the exposure on that. And what it's going to do is just lower, it's only going to be affecting essentially what was red inside that mask. Now what luminance mask is doing is it's using the actual highlights and shadows of your image to sort of clip the shadows. So if we did the opposite way, it would only be affecting the shadows. So you can even layer these masks, layer these kind of luminance masks that way. But if you just hover over it, of course, you can see what's being affected. And in this case, I think we'll just drag it over just a little bit more, drag the exposure down, and you can see we just get a little bit more detail coming back into the sky, and only the sky. We don't want it affecting our mountains, we don't want it affecting our trees. So super quick tip for that. And we have this beautiful image. Now our last one here, which is it was actually a shot in a moraine lake in the morning. Now moraine lake's the other way, but you can see here how smoky it was. I didn't even really take many shots of the lake because you really couldn't see the mountains in the background. And personally, I found this angle to be a lot more interesting. So we're just going to apply our teal and orange preset. We're actually running out of time here, so I'm going to make this quick. Apply our teal and orange preset. For something like this, what we're only going to be doing is increase our temperature and just kind of get rid of those blues. The blues in the sky are a little extreme, so as we bring that up, and of course increase our exposure, and we have our beautiful image. Let's just increase the dehaze just a little bit because we do have so much smoke and fog going on in the background here. And if we hit Y on our keyboard, we have the before and after. So guys, that's pretty much it for this video. If you liked it, if you enjoyed it, just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you learned something. And if you want to download this preset, it is actually available in the description. You can download the XRP, the XMP, the XRP. I've been watching way too many crypto videos. You can download the XMP file inside the description, and that will give you the desktop preset, so you can go ahead, load this into Lightroom, and start playing with it yourself. So guys, that's it for this video. Hope you liked it. Again, drop a like, drop a subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.